So thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Erin Scoople. I am the director of the certification division at the Commission, and I have so many of my colleagues here today because we have a very important topic to talk about, and that is the implementation of the subject matter competency requirement for AB 130. We know you guys have been clamoring for this webinar, and we're so happy that we can finally bring it to you and answer many of your questions. I have the excellent Angel Lopez with me today. I don't know if you all can see him there. I don't know how your video is set up, but he's there, I promise, from the certification division. And then I'm going to go ahead and let David DeGeer, our director of the professional services division, introduce himself and his colleagues.
Thanks, Erin. So I'm David DeGeer, and I'm the director of the professional services division. With me today are Erin Sullivan, Cheryl Hickey, and Michelle Bernardo.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, I know you've been waiting and waiting for this moment. So let's just get right to it. Assembly Bill 130. This was the big education trailer bill that was signed by the governor on July 9th. It took effect immediately, as all trailer bills do. And it had many changes related to teacher preparation and licensure and options for candidates out there. We've talked at length in previous webinars about the basic skills requirement and how that was changed with this bill. But we haven't had the opportunity to go over the details of the subject matter competence requirement, which was also updated with this bill, and it created additional pathways, which we're going to dig into. The bill also had an extension of some testing flexibilities that you probably are very familiar with. The Commission was given the authority to further extend those flexibilities related to the TPA and RECA, and that could possibly be extended until June 30th of 2022, but right now they are in place until December 31st of 2021. And as well, there were some executive order provisions that were extended through the 21-22 school year. So, lots of things in motion, lots of things being updated with this trailer bill. But we're really here to talk about the subject matter competence. So let's move forward to the next slide and we'll get into that. Okay, so before we get into it, we'll talk a little bit about the existing subject matter competence options. You guys are probably very familiar with these. Of course, candidates could pass the applicable CSET exams related to the credential area or authorization that they were seeking. So, of course, for multiple subjects, that was the specific multiple subject subtests. For single subject, those would be the CSET subtests that were related to the content area that they were pursuing in their credential program. And for education specialist, it was the subject matter examinations that were aligned with the core academic subject areas for single subjects, or for multiple subjects, just the standard multiple subject CSET. Candidates could also complete the Commission-approved subject matter preparation program that aligned with the credential they were seeking as well. So those were the existing options. Basically, it was either pass the examinations or complete the subject matter preparation program. Two options, two pathways, and that was it. What AB 130 did is it extended some additional options that really are going to open up the possibilities for candidates who need additional ways to meet subject matter. So it didn't eliminate those existing requirements. You can still take the CSET, you can still complete the subject matter preparation programs that were approved by the Commission. Those are still options for candidates. But really, the intent of these new pieces of legislation were to reduce the reliance on standardized tests and recognize that successful completion of college coursework was sufficient to demonstrate subject matter competence in specific content areas. So we know this isn't a one-size-fits-all for everyone. Just because someone can now meet subject matter through either coursework or a specific degree major does not mean that every single candidate is going to be able to meet subject matter through this pathway. Some candidates are going to come to you and they may have, completed their degree years ago, They may have no coursework that might be applicable to the teacher credential that they are seeking. It isn't a one size fits all. It's not going to apply to everyone. You are still going to have candidates that are going to need to take the CSET exam or complete subject matter preparation program if that's their choice. So you're really going to have to look deeply at what the candidates coming in have completed and what the best path forward for them might be. So it's going to take a little bit of an assessment on your part to really kind of give your candidates the best path forward for them. But I think that, once we all kind of get used to this process and kind of see how we can help the candidates, navigate these new requirements, I think it's going to be really, really helpful, really great, and, really open up the doors for individuals to complete teacher preparation. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the first option under the new AB 130 subject matter competence options, and that is a degree major. So a candidate can have a bachelor's or higher degree that meets subject matter competence. So it needs to be a degree that was issued from a regionally accredited college or university, and it needs to be in the statutory subject sought on the credential. So that means that for a multiple subject candidate, we're going to have very specific majors that are outlined in the legislation. For the single subject candidate, the major has to be very specific, outlined in the legislation that aligns with the credential authorization that they're seeking. And for the education specialist, an individual could use either the multiple subject or the single subject matter pathway degree major to meet that requirement. Some points to note here are that if an individual has a degree that they earned from an institution outside the United States, that can still qualify as long as they have completed that foreign transcript evaluation and it has determined that the degree that they earned is comparable to a 4-year regionally accredited college coursework major in the United States. So we're looking for that equivalency, and if we see that equivalency, if you see that equivalency, you can accept that foreign degree in the appropriate subject area to meet this requirement. So let's go to the next slide, dig in a little bit on what this means for each of the different teaching credentials. So for the single subject teaching credentials, the legislation was very specific. The degree major needs to be in one of the subject areas in which the commission credentials candidates, and those subject areas are outlined in statute. So we don't have much interpretation or leeway that we get to apply here. There's not a lot of policy in this. This isn't a policy decision that the commission or certification staff can make related to this. It's very clear and explicit in the statute that it needs to align with one of these subject areas. So you can see the subject areas listed on the slide here. There's some areas that we do, have a little bit that we're comfortable applying a little bit of flexibility to, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But these are the statutory subjects that are outlined in the statute. So let's go to the next slide. We'll go into a little bit more information about these. So we have those statutory subject areas that were listed on our previous slide. You'll notice that it said science, and we all know that we don't just issue a credential in science. California issues credentials in those 4 major science concentrations. And there is a specific section of statute that gives us the authority to do this. So when we have someone who's trying to meet the subject matter competence for a single subject credential in one of those science areas, we would be looking for the degree major that aligns with the specific science concentration that they are earning. So for biology, they're going to need a degree in biology. Chemistry, same. Geosciences or earth and space sciences would be appropriate. And then physics. If someone has just a general science degree, that would generally be applicable to the foundational level general science. We're pretty sure we're not going to really see general science degrees. It's not something that is issued as a 4-year degree. But if it happens, if we see someone with a general science degree, that would likely align with the foundational level general science authorization. We have had several conversations about what to do with applied majors. The determination is that the word applied in front of a degree major area, it really doesn't change the general rule that that's still a degree in that content area. So applied mathematics would still be considered a mathematics degree. So we're going to ignore or not allow the word applied at the beginning of a degree major to affect its acceptability. So we are going to allow an applied mathematics and applied physics degree to count. So that will go for any subject area. If it's an applied anything, as long as that content area aligns with one of those statutory single subjects, it would be appropriate. Sometimes we see degrees with additional modifiers. So we might see biology, environmental biology, or art, art history, etc. We are accepting those types of degrees. Again, similar to how we're interpreting that the word applied doesn't really change the primary content of the degree. The same rule applies here. It's a biology degree with a focus in environmental biology. We're going to accept that. It's an art degree. It's showing art as the primary content with a concentration in art history. So we would accept those. We've gotten a lot of questions about physical education, and we know that kinesiology is the primary degree earned for folks who are majoring in physical education. At this time, we're accepting degrees that say physical education, kinesiology. If the inverse is correct, kinesiology, physical education, we will also accept those. We're right now not accepting degrees just in kinesiology. We're looking at the possibility of seeking regulations to allow us to accept kinesiology as a degree major for physical education, or possibly seeking amendments to the statute if need be. And there'll be more information on that coming later. But right now we have to see physical education in the title of the degree in order for us to accept it, because the statutory single subject area, if you remember from the previous slide, says physical education is the subject area that we issue credentials in, and therefore the degree has to have physical education in the title. And we'll continue to update, our interpretation and understanding and where we can and can't be flexible with that as we get more questions from you all, and we see more degree majors. This is something that because the trailer bill took effect immediately, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this. So we didn't have the luxury of really digging into what kind of degree majors are we seeing from candidates who are completing teacher preparation. And where would those fall into this statute, So we've been doing that over the past several months as, we've tried to interpret and understand and kind of grasp the scope of the changes that this bill is creating for candidates. So thank you so much for your patience with that. And please continue to send your questions in related to specific degrees. So we can kind of, tease out those nuances like we have with the applied majors and the majors with additional concentrations. Okay, so let's talk about multiple subjects. So for multiple subjects teaching, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt before you go on, because we're getting a lot of questions about, does this degree apply? Does that degree apply? And I just want to iterate at the moment that our hands are very much tied by statute, that they have to be an exact match to the subject area that's going to be listed on the credential. And if there's any question about whether or not the degree applies, you probably are going to need to do a coursework evaluation. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but for the moment, it really has to be an exact match. We don't have flexibility around that until we get some regulations in place.
That's exactly right. Thank you for clarifying that, Erin. I've been in the slides, so I haven't seen the chat, so I appreciate you kind of setting the stage for that. Erin's absolutely right. As I mentioned, this statute is very specific. It has to align directly with the subject areas that we issue credentials in. And we're trying to be as flexible as possible while still staying within the confines of the law. So we definitely are happy to help provide guidance with degree majors as you get them. If you think something is, questionable, but we'll talk a little bit later about how you would approach a situation where somebody has a degree major that you think should maybe qualify, but doesn't because of the very strict language of the statute, and how you can go through the coursework evaluation process for those candidates. Because remember, degree majors are just one piece of this. There's the additional option related to coursework. And, you know, we're really confident that folks who can't qualify with just a degree major might be able to qualify with that coursework evaluation. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so let's do multiple subjects. So again, the statute is very specific. So for a multiple subjects teaching credential, for someone to qualify with just the degree without having to go through any coursework evaluation or without having to take a CSET exam, the degree must be liberal studies. Or there's the other option. So liberal studies, number one. Now, I know you're all asking, what about liberal arts? Can they do liberal arts? Unfortunately, no. It's not specifically liberal arts based on the title alone. So here's how this works. You see liberal studies in the title, the degree title, you're good to go. You're golden, you check the box. You see liberal arts, you go, oh, it doesn't say liberal studies. And I know some of you are sitting there banging your head on the wall going, who cares? It's one word, it doesn't matter. They're practically the same thing. We know, we understand, we get it, trust me. I would love to take liberal arts right now. But unfortunately, the way the statute is written, legally, we just can't do that. But what you can do with a liberal arts major is look at that second bullet there. And you can try to apply that liberal arts major to what's listed in that second bullet. And this is directly from the statute, which says we can take an interdisciplinary studies major that includes coursework in the content areas for multiple subjects. Now, those content areas for multiple subjects, again, just like the single subjects, are listed in statute, and they're there for you on the slide. So you have that liberal arts major, you have an interdisciplinary studies major, or some other, interdisciplinary studies program that you want to take a look at. And if you can find coursework in all of those content areas that are listed in statute and listed here on the slide for the multiple subjects credential, then you can accept that degree. Now, there are no rules, requirements surrounding how much coursework in each of those specific subjects needs to be included in that interdisciplinary studies major. There's no requirements as far as what types of courses need to be taken. You know, is the mathematics course need to be a certain level of mathematics? There's no definition in statute or regulations at this time that defines that further defines that. So there's a lot of flexibility here. You have to go through this process. You have to do your due diligence. You have to confirm that whatever interdisciplinary studies major you're looking at does in fact include coursework in all of these content areas. But you have discretion to apply this statute as long as you're meeting these requirements in a way that you see fit. So you do have a lot of flexibility here with this one. This is not something that the commission will be doing because it's not a specific degree major. We're looking for liberal studies to clear for folks, but you all as a program sponsor can look at this and make this determination without going through the coursework evaluation. This is very similar to the coursework evaluation. When the team goes through that, I think you'll see that the subject matter domains for multiple subjects are going to be pretty close to what you see on this slide. But this is kind of an in-between process, right? So we've got liberal studies as the degree title. You check it off. You don't have to look at any coursework. Or you see another interdisciplinary studies major. You can go through and look for these content areas in that degree program. If you see them, you're good to go. You can check that box. You don't see them, then you're going to have to go through the subject matter domains and do the coursework evaluation. I hope that makes sense. So I know it's a little complicated. Let's go to the next slide and we'll clear up the question about education specialists. So as I said before, education specialists, folks who are going through those credential programs, they can use any degree that meets the subject matter competence for multiple subjects or single subjects. This is a change from previous requirements. Previously, education specialists did have to align their subject matter competence with one of those core academic subject areas. And that was a previous requirement that was related to NCLB. With this change for AB 130, education specialists no longer have to do that. And that's true even for education specialists who are electing to take the CSET exams. So previously they could only take the CSET exams that aligned with those core academic subject areas. They couldn't use, for example, health science to meet the subject matter requirement. That is no longer applicable. Now they can use any single subject or multiple subjects pathway for subject matter to complete their subject matter requirement. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. And I believe I'm going to hand it off here to David. Don't forget to unmute yourself, David.
Got it. Thank you, Erin. So now we're going to switch from majors to coursework. So one of the new options allows for successful completion of coursework that addresses subject matter requirement for the credential area being sought. Next slide. So when looking at coursework, there are some things in statute some requirements that you need to follow. The courses need to be taken at a regionally accredited institution of higher education, which does include community colleges. At this time, there is no definition of successful completion, but the commission will be seeking to add C- or better to regulations. So some of you may remember that we submitted an emergency regulation change to the Office of Administrative Law. They were not able to approve it, so we are going forward with the regular regulation change process, and this is what we'll be seeking. There is no time limit or recency requirement on coursework in statute, but the coursework must address the SMRs. Only commission-approved programs may make the determination that courses can be used towards the determination of subject matter. And there's no specific unit requirement for coursework. The content is what's the most important thing to look at. Next slide. So SMRs, or subject matter requirements, serve as the foundation for subject matter programs and for the CSETs. Subject matter requirements were developed by content experts. They are aligned to the TK-12 academic content standards and have been adopted by the commission. They identify the content that candidates are expected to know. You can find our SMRs in several places. There's the demonstration of subject matter webpage, within alignment matrices on the subject matter program web pages. And then the Pearson web pages for CSET exams also have these SMRs identified for you. Next slide. So SMRs are organized by domains and then within a domain by elements. So for example, the SMRs for agriculture single subject credential has 6 domains. They are plant soil science, ornamental horticulture, animal science, environmental science and natural resource management, agricultural business economics, and agricultural systems technology. Next slide. Then that first domain, plant and soil science, is defined by a narrative. And I'm not going to read it, but this is an example of what those narratives look like. And you can see at the end of that narrative, it says CSET subtest 1 in parentheses. So that lets you know that this domain is covered by CSET subtest 1. Next slide. So what's the difference between domains and elements? So the document on the subject matter competence webpage contains only the domains. Domain 1 also has 6 sub-elements, and you'll see that in the test prep material and on subject matter pages. For example, crop management, production, emerging technologies, and plant productions. These elements may be used to assist programs, but the review of coursework needs to take place at the domain level. So meaning you don't have to find every single element in a course, but you're looking at it, those elements give you an idea of what is covered in a domain. Next slide, please. So who should determine if a course meets the subject matter requirement? That decision is made by the program or institution. These are not the same as the basic skill requirement, so it does require understanding of the content. We strongly encourage you to involve faculty and subject matter experts, including commission-approved subject matter program faculty. Next slide.
Okay, this one is now the last of the options, and you'll see that the reason the legislature put this in was really to allow the maximum flexibility possible. So this one basically says you can mix and match options. So if you have a candidate who maybe has taken some of the CSET exams and passed, but not all of them, then you can look for their coursework and sort of do a combination. They've covered the SMRs in some fashion, but essentially it's a combination of coursework and examinations that together meet the subject matter requirements for whatever the credential is that is being sought. Okay, next slide. So to do that, you really have to determine what subtests the person has already taken or is planning to take. You need to look at what courses they have already taken. And you need to basically put that together to make a determination as to what pieces are they lacking or what are their options. Here, you can either take additional coursework in this area, or you can take the CSET exam, subtest examination in these areas. So it really it allows the candidate to have an opportunity to use all of the flexibilities that they have at hand, to be able to meet the demonstration of subject matter via both coursework and examination. So it does take a little a time and energy for them to kind of figure out what a person has already done or what they plan to do, and to fill in the blanks for them. All right, the next slide. All right, so there's two documents that we've put together. The first one, of course, that is mentioned here is the domains of the subject matter requirements. So that was the one that David mentioned on our subject matter demonstration of subject matter webpage. And that one lists every credential area and the various subject matter domains so that you have those at your disposal all in one packet. And then we have a second document that actually lists all of the CSET subtests and what domains they cover, so that you can kind of look at the coursework or the examination history of a candidate and give them some guidance. You probably need to take either this subtest or you need to take additional coursework. Now, we wanted to mention here that what kicks in here, though, is a 10-year rule that applies. So most of you already know that the CSET exam scores are valid for 10 years. And so by being able to use the CSET test scores here, that 10-year rule does still apply in this case. So if somebody's doing the coursework combination with examinations, that they should have taken the exam within 10 years. There is not a recency in terms of the coursework. The important thing, as David mentioned here, is the content of that coursework and making sure it addresses the SMRs. Okay, next slide. And this is an example. So on the document that we have that show you the subtests so that you have it all in one spot, if somebody is going for that, let's say CSET agriculture, they're going for the ag single subject credential, maybe they've taken exam 1 and they've taken exam 2 and passed both of those, but they have not taken 3. So you'll need to look at their transcripts and their coursework to see if they have had any coursework in agricultural business and economics or agricultural systems technology. So that helps you kind of get a sense of what am I looking for and how can I advise these candidates. And candidates themselves can look and say, oh no, I've had plenty of animal science. but you know what? I haven't had any environmental science. I still have to take subtest 2. So hopefully these documents will be helpful to you. They are on the webpage for the demonstration of subject matter. And as we get into this more, if there are more ways in which the commission can help you with this, if there's documentation or resources, we're happy to try to provide those. All right. Next slide.
As I mentioned before, the commission will be looking to promulgate regulations in the normal format because our emergency regulation package could not be approved at the time. We anticipate submitting a package to the commission at the December 2021 commission meeting. And what this package will seek to do, there's 2 things. One is to identify a list of acceptable majors beyond those listed. So for example, we were talking before about for multiple subjects that it must say liberal studies rather than liberal arts. We will likely be including both liberal arts and elementary education to the list of acceptable subject matters. The other thing we will do is define that successful completion of coursework must be a C- or better. We look to work with you all to help inform this regulations package and identify which majors are appropriate. Some of the feedback we've received was that by using the list in regulations of subsumed subjects, that some of those went too far. So we will be working with different groups to get feedback on what majors should be considered acceptable. Also, staff will continue to work with the field as this law is implemented over the next few years to address any issues. This is a huge change for all of us. And we're going to find things as we go along, and as changes need to be made either to regulation or to ed code, we will be working with you to meet those and best meet the needs of our students and candidates. Next slide, please. So our anticipated timeline for the regulations package is that the commission would consider it at their December 2021 meeting. By the end of January 2022, we will submit the package to the Office of Administrative Law, or OAL, for approval. OAL will have 1 month to review it. And then if approved by OAL, the reg should go into effect beginning of March 2022. Next slide. And I will pass it over to Angel.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. So this screen here should look familiar to any of you who have made online recommendations through the CTC online system. And I just want to go over a few of the updates that we have put into the system related to these new subject matter options. Now, so often when I communicate with the field, I have to use the words like, they're coming, we're working on it. Well, I can tell you what I'm about to show you will be live in the system starting tomorrow. So due to the new options, the big change is going to come on the right side there under the subject matter qualification route. So we have added additional options there. SM, which is our shorthand for subject matter by coursework, subject matter by coursework and examination combination, and the subject matter by degree program. We wanted to make sure that there was a bit of more of a distinction, because in the past, we used to just say like subject matter at a different IHE and the subject matter at the recommending IHE. But now that there's so many options, we added the word program to those, so those subject matter programs are still valid and still usable. So nothing on those options has changed by much. Next slide, please. So you would select what are the new options if you selected one of the new options in the top portion, and then you would move to the middle section of the process and add the authorizations. This will look a little bit different. You no longer have like the button, for example, for exams, because obviously you already made a selection on the top portion. And so you will just see a single authorization button. Now, one other change to this is that if, for example, if you're doing a recommendation for a single subject credential and you mark that the program is in, say, mathematics, when you get to this portion and when you click that new button and you start adding the authorization, you're only going to see one authorization, the authorization that corresponds to the selection in the top program. In some cases in the past, especially with things like subject matter programs, because it's not specific, it kind of opened it up and you could choose anything. And now we're kind of keeping that a little tighter. Next slide, please. So again, this is going to be very much like what we've seen before. The authorization code field is going to open up just like before. The added authorization date is going to work just like before. Really, the only thing that's changed is that we're now able to give you that drop down with the additional codes. And again, in this example, I kept there that methodology art as an example of what I was just talking about, because in the top section, I selected art for this example. Once we open that authorization code field, the only option in there should be art as far as the options for the major authorizations. And that's it. It's really a simple change. I know other things that are being discussed are going to be much more difficult to wrap our heads around because they are so new. But as far as the online portion, we try to make this as easy for you as possible and mirror as much as possible the existing system. Not trying to get too fancy with it, but now we will be able to track these. And again, this will be live in the system beginning tomorrow. And next slide. And I believe I pass it off.
Thank you, Angel. Sorry, I've been trying to answer some questions in the chat. Everybody's coming in really fast and furious with the questions, which is great. But also I want to remind everyone, we aren't likely to be able to get to all of them, but we are going to have the chat saved and we can go through and look at these questions later. So I just want to answer a couple of questions that keep coming up, because I know as people join at different times during this presentation, you can't see the chat history. So just a couple of things. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted. Yes, the slide deck will also be posted, which means everywhere in the slide deck where you've seen a hyperlink to something that leads out to additional information, either on our website or another website, those will all be live and available to you. And yes, we are going to create some kind of an FAQ Q&A document to help answer some of these questions. And what's the final yes? Oh, the final yes is yes, we will continue to be working with you to provide technical assistance on this. So with that said, moving just a little bit forward here, let's talk about accreditation for institutions. So there are a lot of places in precondition, well, not a lot. There are a variety of places within the Commission's preconditions, common standards, and program standards that talk about either subject matter competence specifically or reference candidate requirements for the credential. In many cases, a requirement is subject matter. Not in all cases, obviously, not in all 40 credentials that we issue. So just in places for, if you have an accredited program, just make sure that you are tracking the areas and preconditions that talk about subject matter. We're going to have to do some updates probably to preconditions language. So that will be coming. Common standards language should not need to be updated. It just references, the institution's recommendation process, and that the institution assure that the recommendation process makes sure that candidates have addressed all of the requirements. That's going to include subject matter. Common Standard 5 also talks about candidates meeting all the requirements. And then, of course, in many, but not all of like gen ed teaching and special ed, we talk about subject matter. And so you're going to need to make sure that, that you're in alignment with the allowance for these new pathways in those areas of the standards. So this slide is to just sort of remind you where, as you are responding to preconditions, common standards, program standards, where are you perhaps going to be thinking about your process for verifying subject matter. Next slide. All right, and so then the next question is, we have a process, we have a site visit, what do we need to be doing about keeping records? So while we do not dive deeply into how your candidates are currently meeting subject matter in our accreditation site visits, and that isn't going to change, but if a question arises during the site visit about the institution's granting of subject matter competence to candidates, you'll need to have a process documented, because the site visit team could ask for some additional evidence about what you're doing. So as you move forward, you'll want to have some documentation about what is your process. Are you involving other faculty? Do you have specific folks designated in your program to do, let's say, coursework reviews? Just, it doesn't have to be, a long narrative, but, just a process. Think about having an outline. You also need to make sure that you include now some updates in candidate handbooks, et cetera, for their options to meet subject matter competence, because as has been stated here, the language in AB 130 makes it clear it is a candidate right to have access to these various options. So you just want to make sure that your handbooks let them know, even at just a high level, you now can do CSAT examinations, you can do an approved subject matter program, you can do a coursework or degree major, or a combination of coursework and exams. So just something that lets those candidates know that they have a variety of options now. You will want to have some kind of process evidence for yourselves within your own program about when this is going to take place for candidates. So in some cases, candidates have to have subject matter before they step into that final sort of whole class instruction, or for interns, they need to have their subject matter competence demonstrated at a specific time in their pathway. So just making sure that you are allowing yourselves the time that you need to do some of these things, which are going to be a little more intensive, like coursework evaluations, in a timely manner, so that candidates can step into these other experiences that are parts of their programs. Designated, again, who's going to be doing these evaluations, or who's going to be ensuring that, what is the candidate pathway that each of your candidates are using, and then who at the unit level is maybe overseeing that. Because again, it's not going to be occurring in all of your programs. So, who within your programs is maybe doing it, but then also that oversight at the unit level, which is, a common standards requirement. And then maintaining some kind of record, spreadsheet, documentation, whatever, of, how your candidates are meeting subject matter competence. So while we've updated, for instance, our credential recommendation process to allow for the selection of these additional options, you may need to also go in and update your own candidate tracking databases, so that you add these new options in as well, so that you know what options your candidates are using. I'm going to answer a couple of questions because I am also looking at the chat. In terms of, because we have been asked this on a number of occasions, can programs charge? The commission has no purview over what you charge your candidates for, and the legislation does not say that you cannot. So that's the best answer that I can give. Next slide. This is Cheryl.
Yeah, so we wanted to put in front of you a couple of scenarios just to get you thinking about how this might work. We've been living with it for quite a while, trying to digest it and understand what it means for credentialing. So I'm sure you all have as well, if you've gotten lots of questions we know from your candidates. So this first scenario just has to do with the liberal arts degree, which Erin Scoble had mentioned before. And what you have to think about is there's sort of two different time periods. There's a time period between now and when we have permanent regulations approved. Until then, liberal arts is not specified, as Erin mentioned, in the law, as much as we would like it to be. So with a liberal arts degree, we know that you cannot just accept the major on its face. So Diego has a liberal arts degree from a local university and applies to a commission-approved teacher credentialing program. Can this degree be used to satisfy subject matter by academic degree major? So remember, there's several options, and right now the answer is no for academic degree because it's not liberal studies. But then you go to the next thing. That doesn't mean you can't then look at other options. So is the liberal arts degree an interdisciplinary studies major that includes coursework and all of the following? So if you look at the liberal arts degree and you determine that it includes everything that the law says that an interdisciplinary studies major, and that does not mean that those words have to be in the title of the degree. So look at it. If it is a degree major that crosses types of disciplines, and specifically the disciplines that are mentioned in the law: language studies, literature, math, science, social science, history, the arts, physical education, human development. If it covers all of those, then you could use it under that option. If it does not, then you still can do a coursework evaluation and compare what is in that liberal arts degree to the subject matter requirements. Now, we know that's lots of steps, but that's essentially the thinking when you have a major that doesn't align exactly. Now, should the commission, as it considers its permanent regulations, and I say permanent just because they're not emergency regulations, so they're really regular regulations. When it considers that, it may include liberal arts as an acceptable major, but until that time, we cannot accept it in liberal arts. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit, and we'll go to the next slide. All right.
This is me. Yeah, this is me again. Sorry, everyone. I am not as good at multitasking as Terry Clark was. she really set the bar for that. So some more scenarios, and we are using a lot of the same scenarios. Part of that is because these are some of our more commonly asked questions. But just as a reminder, again, we're going to be taking a look at your questions in the FAQ. I've been seeing some very specific types of questions, and we may not be answering them today, but please know that we are looking at what you're asking. We really do want to provide some help to you. So in this particular, or these, I've got some scenarios here and on the next slide. So from a program, I have a person who majored in history and wants a single subject social science credential. Is the history degree enough to satisfy subject matter for the social science? The answer, not by degree alone at this time, because AB 130 says it has to be one of the credential areas that we issue a credential in, and we don't issue a credential in history. So you would have to do a coursework evaluation for this person. But the likelihood of somebody with a history degree not having met at the domain level the requirements for social science is fairly slim. And again, as we move forward to looking at regulations, we're very much looking at including things like history in social science. So we will be moving forward on that. Next scenario. I have a person who majored in environmental science, and now they want a chemistry credential. Are they subject matter competent based on their degree? This is another example of not by degree, because the exact match is not there. It has to be chemistry, but you could do a coursework evaluation. And again, environmental science is likely to have a lot of the domain areas for chemistry in it, as well as you can look into some of their lower division coursework. AB 130 doesn't say it has to be all upper division or postgrad, or it doesn't designate the coursework in any way. So somebody with environmental science as a major, you may dip down into their lower division coursework, but in all likelihood, you should be able to find the domain areas listed there. What if they wanted a foundational level science credential? So this is the same person with environmental science as a major. Again, not by degree. And those foundational level math and science areas are going to be some things that we really do have to kind of work out in regulations. As Erin was speaking about earlier, or it could have been Angel, my apologies. But you can still do a coursework evaluation. And for foundational level science and foundational level math, we are often talking about teaching courses that are typically found at about 9th grade and below. So you should be very able to find the requirements for foundational level math and foundational level science in a degree major like environmental science, and certainly in looking at if you're including their lower division coursework. Next slide. Okay, I have a candidate who, pardon me, I'm having problems with my screen. I have a candidate who started as an agriculture science major and changed their major their junior year. Now they have an animal science degree. And I know you're all familiar with candidates, students in general choosing, change their major. I did it. Lots of us did it. How am I going to determine what they need for a single subject ag credential? Again, you're going to have to do coursework evaluation on this one. It's not going to be a straight ahead degree, perfect match. But if you take a look at the domain level language for agriculture, you're going to see a lot of things in there that cross over between like an ag science, somebody who was taking coursework towards ag science and then switch to animal science. There's a lot of overlap there. And between those two, that candidate probably has subject matter, but you're just going to have to do the coursework evaluation again there. We have a degree that we call Education for the 21st Century, and we actually did hear this from a program. It doesn't contain the words interdisciplinary studies or liberal studies in the title, but it contains all of the content areas listed on slide 7 that Aaron Skubel was talking about earlier. Does it work under the allowable majors? The answer is, again, no, it doesn't work under the allowable majors. It has to be liberal studies at this point until we get regulations passed. But so you're going to be doing that. You're going to be doing that coursework evaluation again. But
actually, Erin, it falls under the interdisciplinary studies.
It does
7 areas. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We've been having a lot of discussions about this here at the agency. So, and also the language of AB 130 shifted slightly on us right at the last minute. So
Erin, I'm calling this like the coursework evaluation light, because it is really very, very, very broad. It's not quite the, green light that a exact degree major alignment might be, but it's not going into the coursework evaluation that has to align with the domains. So it's like coursework evaluation light. You're just looking for any courses that would meet any of those 7 areas.
Right. And I apologize. So basically, if it's an interdisciplinary studies, like small I, small s type of degree, just look at it and look for those seven subject areas. And in all likelihood, it probably has it. So thank you, Erin. Thanks for jumping in. And I apologize, everybody.
There was a question that just came in, and it was, in CTC Online, if we're doing this coursework evaluation light option for the interdisciplinary studies, what would we select? That's an excellent question. And you would select by degree major. So I know that sounds kind of confusing, but the provision in the statute that allows someone to use this path is within the option that allows someone to complete based on degree major. So you'd select degree major for that one. Good
Thanks
question.
So much, Erin. And I'm just going to take a little bit of liberty here because I do keep seeing this question pop up, and I'm really very much covering, the answers to a lot of these scenarios is no, but you can do the coursework evaluation. So I want to be really clear about this because I also just mentioned AB 130 kind of changed on us right at the last minute. There was language in the original bill that said that only an institution with an approved subject matter program could do a coursework evaluation. That is not the case. You do not have to have an approved subject matter program at your institution to take advantage of this. There was also at one point some talk that you would have to have faculty specifically from a subject matter program do these evaluations. That's also no longer the case. You now have the flexibility to determine which people on your faculty you are going to have working on these coursework evaluations. Does it make the most sense to have people from the academic departments if you have questions about, some of the course content? Sure. But there's nothing in the law that says that it has to be those individuals. There's also nothing in the law that specifies a minimum grade requirement at this time, although the commission would, of course, encourage you to, consider C- at least, or high, the C or higher, which tends to be the standard, at least for CSUs. Don't be confused by the basic skills requirement flexibilities that just went into place, which requires a B or higher. It does require B or higher, which means, B- or higher. For subject matter, there was no such language in the bill. So it is up to you at your institution. And, In some of these areas, you may want to have conversations with your own, your own faculty, your own academic senates, and maybe even your own legal advisors, just to make sure you feel really comfortable with what it is that you're doing. So my final scenario here, we have reviewed a candidate's history of coursework, and there's one small aspect of a domain that's unclear whether they have covered the content. How do we determine that their coursework has met the domain? This goes back a little bit to what I was just saying. You may at that point need to sort of reach out to some folks in the academic department. So let's say you're looking at an ag science person and you're just not sure. You're seeing one little area and you think, I don't know. You may want to just, reach across the aisle, reach across to these other folks at your institution and say, can you take a look at this for us and let us know? It's a gray area right now. You need to make the decision. Is the majority of the content there for this person? Is it, if you have a question though, reach out in your own institution. And of course, the commission is always, we're going to be here working through this with you all for quite some time, for sure. Next slide. All right, this is Angel. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello again, everyone. So just some kind of very quick bullet pointed common questions. But actually to begin, I want to go off script on this one and mention something that I wrote in the chat and I forgot to mention when I was speaking to my previous slides regarding the online system. Because of course the question is out there of, if we're using any of these new options, do we have to submit anything when we make an online recommendation? And the answer is no. There's no form, there's nothing. Erin Sullivan, when she was doing some of her slides, did kind of speak to what should be done, which is that you should keep that evidence with your records there at the IHE, at the recommending IHE. But we are not going to ask for that. Just like currently, and as it's been for several years, if someone was meeting subject matter requirement based on a subject matter program, we also didn't ask to see any evidence of that. That's just a selection that you chose and you just make your recommendation. We're going to treat these the same as that. So just put that out there. Okay, it's a common question. Can we accept an out-of-state degree or out-of-state coursework? Yes, absolutely. Keep in mind, you want to make sure that it is from a regionally accredited institution, just like you would for so many other things we do. And to expand on that a little bit, you can also accept out of country coursework and degree majors. But again, you want to make sure that those are first evaluated by one of our approved evaluation services, just to make sure that it is going to meet our standards and a high level bar for everyone. Can a commission approved program that is an LEA implement these options? Absolutely. It doesn't matter if you're an LEA. What matters is that you're a commission approved program. And for all programs, these options are now good to go. Do we need to ensure coursework alignment to the SMRs with the academic degree option? No, you do not. So for like the big ones, like for a math, that's kind of easy. But this really speaks much more to kind of what Erin was talking about, how like it's an evaluation light. And because it's an evaluation light for that interdisciplinary option, you are only looking to hit those major areas that were outlined. You're not looking to make sure that these things align with the SMRs. That is a whole other level of work that's not necessary for that. What about community college coursework? So that's probably going to come up a lot. And the answer is yes, it can be used with a few caveats. Of course, just like the regular college, you want to make sure it's a regionally accredited institution. We've mentioned this several times. There's nothing currently in place as far as what grade level they have to pass at, but keep in mind that you want it to be nice and vigorous. And then the other thing is you want to make sure that community college coursework is transferable to a 4-year degree institution. So if it's something that's very low level and it only gives them credit at the community college, it's not going to meet the same standard. Can we partner with other commission programs to review coursework / transcripts? Absolutely. And we definitely encourage that. Programs should try, and whenever possible, to speak to each other and establish best practices and work with others in your area. Can we charge candidates for the evaluation? I believe it was Erin Sullivan who spoke to this earlier. The legislation is silent, so that is a local level decision. And then the last one, must we accept another institution's determination of a subject matter competence for one of our candidates? So this one gets a little complicated. And if I miss any part of this, other panelists, please feel free to step in. So now that this is a legal option, candidates do have a right to use that legal option. So keep that in mind first and foremost. What that's going to butt up against is that if they're coming to your program in your institution, you have a responsibility to ensure that they have met the standards necessary, because you're ultimately going to be sort of attesting to that with the recommendation itself. So it is possible, for example, if someone brings you documentation that they had an evaluation done elsewhere and you're looking at the transcripts and you're like, a mistake was made, there's no way this works, then that might be a scenario where you're like, well, we're not going to accept it. But in most cases, we highly encourage you to go ahead and accept it. It's going to cut down work. It's going to bring down barriers to getting more teachers into the profession. But again, it's your responsibility kind of butting up against their rights as a candidate to have this option, because it is a legal option. And then I believe I'm set on this slide, and I'm passing up to David and/or Cheryl.
I'll take it. So we have several support pieces for you as you're going through these processes. First is the coded correspondence 21-05, and that was our first one after AB 130 was signed on subject matter competence and basic skills requirements. Program sponsor alert 21-11, and that one was published last Friday. An update on the implementation of subject matter competence. The one previous to that, PSA 2110, additional clarifications on SMC. We've got quite a bit of information on AB 130 at that link. And then you can always use the credential information guide, and login information is provided on this slide. Next slide, please. There are several ways to contact commission staff, depending upon which division you need help, from which division you need help. So we have email addresses there. We also have office hours, either once a month for certification, or professional services has several different topics. And you can find those listed in the PSDE news.
And if we can go back to the last slide, I just want to mention one thing real quick. I noticed in the chat, a lot of folks were asking for those direct links to the subject matter domains documents. So that link there for Program Sponsor Alert 21-11, which you can also find on the Professional Services Division section of our webpage, has those links in it. So you just access that PSA and it will have all of those pertinent links to the subject matter domains in that document. And as well, some of you may know that the certification office hours are happening directly after this webinar. Please be gentle to those folks, as they are not here attending this to hear all the things that we are saying to you right now. So if you have follow-up questions related to this webinar, just be aware that they're prepping for the webinar now and they're not here listening to us. So some of this information they won't have for you also. Just throwing that out there.
Great. And I just want to mention on this slide as well. So I think some of the confusion comes between PSA 2110 and 2111. And I just wanted to let you know that what happened is we submitted emergency regulations, as David and Aaron mentioned. We submitted emergency regulations. The Office of Administrative Law had issues with those emergency regulations. So we had to step back and rethink what we were allowed to do, given their feedback. These are the lawyers that allow us to have regs. We had to step back and think, okay, what is actually in the law and what can we propose? And so that's why 2111 is the most current. It does reference 2110, but any of the future looking what's in 2110, you want to just really focus on what the law allows now. So that's why 2111 is important. It's very confusing. In our, we were trying to get the word out to institutions as we knew what was happening at the time, but things changed in government work. And so we've had to kind of change our strategy and our thinking. We are putting regs before the commission in December, and we will be talking with the field on that. So I just want to clarify, that's why there's some questions about who can offer these. We thought that it was just approved subject matter programs for the time being. We now, it is now open to all commission approved preparation programs. And that was one of the major changes between those two PSAs, excuse me. We want to go ahead and take some of your questions now. So I'm going to kind of look through the chat and go back to some of the questions. And I think we've answered the question about the liberal arts major. We had a whole slide on that. Whoops.
Actually, Cheryl, if I can, there are a lot of folks. I think folks were feeling clear, and then we talked about we talked about coursework evaluation light, and now and then sort of the questions kind of started up again, where people are they're a little unsure because we had been saying, well, it needs to be liberal studies because we don't issue liberal arts, but it, if you do a coursework evaluation, it has to be in these areas, and I suspect perhaps the confusion might be coming from, do we select coursework evaluation or are we selecting degree major? So I don't know, Erin, if you can possibly
let me try to. So the way this law was written, and it said has 3 specific subsections of the law. The first one says a candidate can meet subject matter now by degree major. The second section says a candidate can meet subject matter now by coursework that aligns with the domains. And then the third section says a candidate can meet subject matter by mixing and matching any of the options that exist for subject matter. So those are the 3 new things. The section for degree major includes multiple subjects, recognizing subject matter for liberal studies degrees, capital L, capital S, degree titles of liberal studies, or other degree majors that are interdisciplinary in nature and include coursework in the multiple subjects content areas. So it still falls within the statutory authority of degree major, but it makes you take a little extra step to look for content areas that are included in the degree. So I hope that clarifies. It is not a full assessment of subject matter aligned with the domains. If you think of it this way, you're looking at a degree major program, an interdisciplinary studies degree major program. It might be titled elementary education. You're looking at that degree major program to see if that degree major program included that content that's listed in statute for multiple subjects. For a coursework evaluation, it doesn't have to be packaged in a degree major. It can be taken at like 4 different community colleges and then at a 4-year institution, and you can pick coursework from all over the place for that candidate to meet that requirement as long as it's all degree applicable coursework. So that's the primary difference. I hope that clarifies. And that's why for the interdisciplinary studies degree major, that includes those multiple subject content areas, you would be selecting degree major in the CTC online recommendation because it falls under the authority that is the scope of the degree major. And that the purpose of that, the reason we want you to select that is so we can have accurate data for the legislature and any other interested parties who want to know, okay, we wrote this law. How much was it used? How applicable was this? How much did this open up teacher preparation for these candidates? We also wrote the coursework law. How much is this being used? In the future, if somebody wants to make an adjustment to one of those sections of statute, they can come to us and say, who is using this? How many candidates are using this? How many individuals would this affect? How many individuals did this move into teacher preparation? So that's kind of the idea, and that's why it needs to align with the degree major section. So I know it's very confusing, and I apologize for that, but that's the thought behind it.
I think the next question that I wanted to raise kind of helps it doesn't help clarify, but it's another example of something between when is it a coursework eval and when is it a degree and when is it a subject matter program. So the question that was asked is if it's a degree in music, but it only has 30% of the coursework that's typically in a subject matter program, can we refuse to accept the degree as satisfying subject matter? And the answer is, if it's a degree in music and the person is seeking a music credential, that is a match. So
I'm glad you brought that up, Cheryl, because I was thinking there, my thought on that was, if the candidate is saying, I want to use the degree major option, you don't have to dig any further, especially right now, if the degree major is an exact match to their credential type. You don't have to dig down.
You have
and
to
I
think
know
of
that
them
there's,
as, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, I know there's probably a desire there to want to dig in and make sure that the course or that degree really meets, your standards of what you would want for subject matter prep for that candidate. But the reality is, you can make life easier on yourself. It is not required that you dig any deeper than that degree major if it's an exact match. You don't need to. And frankly, if the candidate says they want to use the degree major option and you try to dig in a little bit into the coursework, you might have some conflict, and so you can just take that degree.
And I would just say that they're different options. So they are different with different unique circumstances around them.
Mm-hmm.
So the subject matter programs have already been deemed aligned with the subject matter requirements. A degree is a different option. So I think if you think about it that way, rather than they're not necessarily all equal, they're equal in that they result in the same subject matter determination, but they may have different requirements.
Cheryl, because you just said they're not all equal, let me just give this too, because I saw this question come up. Somebody said the gist of a couple of the questions was, so does one trump the other? And the reality is no. They're just all right. All the options are there for candidates. They have a right to all of them. In the commission's eyes, they're all acceptable, and there isn't one that's deemed to be any higher than the other. So there's no trumping. A candidate can use any of these options. And so can you.
Right. Okay, so let's go to this one, which is an interesting one. Can you talk a bit about when there's a modifier to the degree? For example, Spanish language and Hispanic cultures for a candidate seeking single subject Spanish, or integrative biology for a candidate seeking biology?
So Spanish language, Spanish culture, I think would absolutely be acceptable. The primary, title of the degree is Spanish language. Obviously we're not going to be able to look for something that says world language Spanish, because we know that degrees aren't written that way. So yes, we would consider that to be acceptable. And what was the second example, Cheryl?
Integrative biology for candidates.
Integrated biology. Yes, I think that would be just equivalent to applied biology. It's just a strange verb that's put in front of the major for a very specific purpose, I'm sure, for that institution that created that degree. But as far as it aligning with the content area or the subject area of biology, we would consider that to be appropriately aligned. Yeah.
And then the modifier education. So math education, science education, English education.
That one is a little bit more difficult, and we haven't been able to make a determination on that one yet. So that one is going to require some further conversation at the commission before we can right now the answer is no, we're not accepting those. So we'll have to look into that a little bit.
And our number one question on single subject is always about kinesiology, which I think you covered, but you want to state it a little again about what we're looking for.
So right now, the way the law is written, the way we've been interpreting it is it has to be physical education in the title. So we're looking for physical education. If it says kinesiology : physical education, we will accept it. If it says the opposite, physical education : kinesiology, we'll accept it. Just kinesiology right now, we're not accepting, but we do anticipate that being included in our regulations, and that we would be able to accept it once the regulations go through.
Great. This one is an interesting one, and I have to say I have to think about it. Social science major on our campus does not include history or political science or econ or geography. So the major would not, in fact, meet the criteria of subject matter preparation. It's a degree in social science.
So is the law law is written right now. If the candidate comes in and says, I want to use the degree option, and they show you that they have a degree in social science, they can clear subject matter with that degree.
Yeah, right. I'd be really interesting to find out if it doesn't include history, political science, econ, or geography. I'm wondering what it does include. Interesting. Yeah. I would love to hear that. If somebody has that information, that'd be interesting.
And Cheryl, I want to jump in. There's questions about biochemistry, and somebody mentioned that certification staff verified by email that is not acceptable. Correct. Right now, biochemistry is not acceptable for either biology or chemistry. You will have to go in and do a coursework evaluation on that one.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so let's see. I don't want to skip too many. Okay, with the BA path, does the C or higher grade in each course apply? So a coursework evaluation must be a C or better.
So for the BA degree path, absolutely not. You are not looking at coursework unless you're trying to use an interdisciplinary studies major. You are not looking at the final GPA earned for that degree. Did the person get the degree conferred? Yes or no? Does the title align with whatever content area they're completing their credential in? Yes, then you're good.
Thank you. That I was not interpreting that question correctly. So if it's the coursework, if you're doing coursework evaluation, you need a C or high or C plus. Actually, right now you don't.
Right now you don't. Right.
After
right.
the commission regs, you may.
We would very much advise you to align your evaluations with that requirement, because that is right now the proposed draft regulations that we're bringing forward to the commission. It's possible that the commissioners may decide that they want a higher bar or a lower bar, but that is right now what the proposed regulations will say.
Exactly. Would a Bachelor of Music major in performance qualify for music in single subject? If it's a bachelor's in
It's a Bachelor of Science in Music, and then there's that qualifier, performance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Does it have the word music primarily as the title?
Before the modifier, right?
If it's just a verb added to that subject area, then the verb doesn't really affect it. Think of it that way.
And
so it doesn't matter where the modifier comes, because that's a question that came later. Does the modifier, does it have to come after the major? Can it come before the major?
No,
the answer
it doesn't matter. It's a modifying verb. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, great. That's a very helpful comment. This next one I think is important for prep programs. For education specialists, do they have to have a matching teaching assignment to their academic degree major, or teaching assignments do not matter as long as they have a matching academic degree major? So what I want to say here is don't mix and match the understanding about subject matter and what that allows you to do and what the requirements are for the credential. So if you are an ed specialist credential seeker, you should do a placement that is appropriate for an ed specialist credential and what's required in the program standards. So that doesn't change. If the person has, an example came up of an agriculture bachelor's degree and is able to get in that way, but they're getting an ed specialist credential, they need to have an appropriate placement. They shouldn't be in a single subject ag class. They should be in a class that allows them to fulfill their program requirements in special ed. Anyone want to add anything more to that? Okay, great. All right. I think we've already answered the question about the education. What a bachelor's degree in that? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I do want to clarify something. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of questions about what about this degree and what about this degree and what about this degree.
Okay.
The commission is providing guidance, and we're indicating what we are accepting for subject matter. So for example, if someone is applying for an added authorization or an additional credential when they already have an existing credential, what we call the 80499 process. Somebody is applying directly to us and they're saying, I have a multiple subject credential. I want to add a single subject credential in PE. We are interpreting the legislation and how a candidate might meet subject matter based on degree for that added PE credential. You all, as the programs, have the authority to do the same thing. So I think that maybe we haven't made that very clear. Mm-hmm. This is your evaluation, just like you are doing the evaluation for the coursework. We're providing you guidance and we're providing you what our best practices are and what we are doing in the hopes that there is consistency for candidates in the field. But, you know, if you are interpreting a degree major to align with those statutory single subject areas, and you have a strong legal case to stand on for that, remember you're dealing with law here, so you have to make sure that you're following the law, and we want to make sure that you are all in compliance with the law. We're not going to dig in and question that. I know that there has been some instances related to the basic skills where programs have applied for credentials on behalf of candidates and used a coursework evaluation process to meet basic skills. And some of those have been kicked back by certification. And that is because there was a blatant disconnect with the law. And so we're doing that to protect you all and to protect the commission as well. We don't want any of us involved in these new evaluations because it is so new and it is very difficult to understand and kind of get your bearings on it. We've had so many conversations about this to try to, you know, make sure we're all on the same page. And so we don't want you all to be in a position where, you know, there's a question on a candidate's recommendation 5 or 10 years from now. So we're doing that as a protection for you all. So please understand that when we kick those back to you, we're doing that as a protection for you all. We're doing it as a protection for us as well to make sure that we're all following the law. With these, you know, we're not, there's going to be a little bit of a different process here. We're not digging into the degree majors that these candidates are completing and that you are submitting as your assessment of subject matter. When you submit that recommendation and you select degree major, we're trusting you that you did your due diligence, that you followed the guidance and you followed the law and you aligned it with that statutory single subject area. Some of you may have legal counsels that say to you, don't accept kinesiology : physical education. That is not what the law says. Some of you might have legal counsels that say, we've read and interpreted this law and we think you can accept kinesiology for physical education. That is something you have to do you have to go through that process on your own and do your due diligence and make sure that you all of your institutions are doing what your legal counsel is comfortable with and what you all are comfortable with. And we advise that you follow the guidance that we're providing, but it is just guidance and it is not in any way our authority to tell you what you can and can't accept. So I know I think some of my colleagues here are like, okay, we're going there, but we're going there. Like this is your authority to make that determination. And the same goes with the coursework evaluation. Is your authority to make the determination. The domains are provided for you. You have the authority to accept the coursework as it aligns with the domains, and you all are making that determination. So I hope that helps. I hope you feel a little bit of freedom here. You don't have to run every degree major by us.
Right.
We're here to provide you help and guidance, and we want to be there for you. Because it is totally new and scary and strange to be doing this, but we're here for you. If you need guidance, we're happy to give you our opinion, but we are not the end all be all as far as these degree majors go. We will have a process for accepting some and denying some, and we will share that with you and provide you with that information if you want to align your process with ours. We hope that you do that, but anyways, I just want to throw that out there.
I think on that topic, there's a good question here, which is when you say doing due diligence, do you mean investigating the major in the appropriate university's catalog for the appropriate academic year, or do you mean examining individual applicant candidates' transcripts for the content areas? And I think it's both.
It depends on which option you're using. If you're talking about a degree major, I think it's doing your due diligence to make sure that the title of that degree major aligns with the law.
Right.
I think it's really that simple. Look at the law, which we've kind of provided in the PSAs in a summary form. You know, we've kind of tried to frame it without, you know, all the ed code language and give you the list of the statutory single subject areas and give you kind of the additional information related to the multiple subjects content areas and the 4 science content areas. But it's just really, you know, making sure that it aligns with that statute.
I'm kind of going through this one comment that says, thank you for the information. You mentioned the intent of the law was to reduce reliance on standardized tests. Can you please elaborate on that? I think getting to her example, it sounds like there's a disconnect between the mindset or background of the legislators and the reality of how this will be implemented. For example, not recognizing that most history, social science teachers are history majors.
So, the intent was, at least our understanding, the intent of the legislation was that we should not make candidates demonstrate their either subject matter competence or basic skills more than once. If they've already demonstrated it in one fashion, we should accept that. So if they've already demonstrated it through a major or through coursework, we should accept that. And I think it's also more people coming to the understanding that some people just are not good at standardized tests. We probably all have someone either in our family or a friend that we know who was smarter than anything, but just could not do well on a standardized test. So these options open up our profession to more people who otherwise were held out.
And I think it's those of us that work in and around the legislature understand that there's always messiness. And so, yes, there is a disconnect in some regards. And that's what the commission is here to try to work through those over the next couple of years. So as you identify issues or problems and you bring them to us, and we can, try to fix them in either regulations or cleanup language or whatever we need to do to make this work for everybody. But legislation's messy.
Cheryl, can we address, I've seen this question a couple of times about which of the options, so degree, coursework evaluation, or mix and match, can be implemented now and by whom?
Ah, very good. Yeah, absolutely. So that was the big change between PSA 2110 and 2111 is that once we heard back from OAL, these options are all available. And one of the things we were sort of waiting to do was make sure that you had the programming, or we had the programming that you could go into the CTC online and actually recommend folks. And then you heard Angel say that will be ready tomorrow. So you can begin, you do not have to wait till our regulations are passed. We are offering this webinar today so that you can begin the recommendation process for these candidates under these options. I don't know if you want to add anything more, everybody.
So you may, as of today, hopefully you have been doing the degree evaluations and accept degree majors, but as of today, you can still continue to accept degree majors. You can also begin coursework evaluations if you choose to do so. And you can also begin mixing and matching coursework with CSET examinations.
Right. And
I want to clarify the question that just came in. These subject matter options are not applicable to bilingual authorizations. So these are for statutory single subject content areas or the multiple subject or the education specialist credentials for meeting the subject matter requirement. Bilingual authorizations are not standalone authorizations. They do not exist on their own. So even though CSET is a requirement to meet the bilingual authorization, it is not a subject authorization. So just keep that in mind. This is about your basic teaching credential, content area authorization for that basic teaching credential.
Somebody's asking, could you please go back to who will be evaluating the coursework, the subject matter program like the history department or the single subject program? And going back to Aaron Skibble's comment, there's a lot of flexibility in the law. The law is not prescriptive as to who should make that evaluation. We encourage you to use content experts or your subject matter programs, but the law does not say you have to. So it's an institutional decision. You need to have a process in place for looking at this coursework. All right, and okay, so there's several comments in here about the time it will take to do coursework evaluation. And I just want to acknowledge, we understand that is true. There was a lot of pressure to find ways to open the door, to ways to demonstrate subject matter competence. And that's, maybe on the other side, then there is some workload involved. unfortunately. So, and that'll have to be addressed, at the institutional level. What about the majors in health science? And they need one or more sections of the CSET in multiple subjects. What about if the majors is in health science and they need one or more section of CSET in the multiple subjects? Can they use coursework from their health science major to waive one of the CSET in math and science? I'm not sure I'm following this whole question. What
so
about?
I think it's really just comes down to if, regardless of what credential they're going for, multiple subjects or single subject, if they have a CSET subtest and they have coursework, they can mix and match. So any combination thereof to meet the subject matter domains and the requirements is allowable. But when you're doing the mix and match, it's similar to the coursework evaluation. You're going back to the domains. You're looking at the domains. So you need to make sure that you look at what CSETs they've taken and what domains those CSETs align with. And then whatever CSETs they haven't passed, that's the domains you need to find coursework in. So I hope that clarifies. It doesn't, whatever combination you can do is acceptable. If it's for the multiple subjects, they can meet coursework for 3 of the 4 subtests and then, use the 4th subtest to meet the final domains.
Right. And make sure you're keeping good documentation at the institutional level of how that candidate met.
Yeah, we know a lot of multiple subject candidates have trouble passing the CSET subtest that includes the math and science. So those folks might be prime candidates for this option to, take the CSET, apply those subtests that they pass, and then you look for coursework for the subtests that they didn't pass.
Angel, are there any forms that they need to use to submit with the credential application, such as the BSR 41 for the basic skills?
Not for these new options, no. I think I touched on that before, but it's sort of going to be treated just like for years we've treated the option of a subject matter preparation program. We know we don't ask for that form. We don't ask for a letter from whatever the institution was that did that evaluation for the individual. But again, Aaron Sullivan spoke to this before. You want to make sure that on your end, as the recommending agency, you have that documentation ready to go just for your own records. But no, there's no form, there's no nothing that you have to submit when you do the online recommendation. You just go ahead and choose the appropriate option from that dropdown, and you just move forward with it.
Nice and easy. Love it. I'm going to direct this one to Aaron Sullivan. Aaron, an LEA, like a county office, may not have all of the subject matter experts. Does this mean we will need to work with a university for subject matter expertise?
It might. That's the answer. I know that's unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, if you're feeling unsure about your coursework evaluation, again, reach out to your local IHE and talk to them about that for sure. Get the help where you can. And most of you have relationships with IHEs in your area because you're taking their preliminary candidates or you're placing their student teachers. So don't hesitate at all to reach out to those folks.
And this next one is, whose responsibility is it to evaluate the coursework? Is it the graduate school where the student earned their degree, or is it the responsibility of the teacher preparation program? Students are reaching out to their grad to obtain SMR via coursework approval when they are in a teacher prep program at a different institution. That's a really good question. So the responsible party for ensuring that a candidate has met subject matter for a candidate that's enrolled in their program is the program in which the candidate is enrolled. You may also work with other institutions. There's nothing that stops you from doing that, working with other commission approved preparation programs. But candidates really should be talking to the program that they're enrolled in. They shouldn't be kind of bouncing all over the place, but they really should be talking to the program. And that is the message we're going to be trying to send to candidates, is to talk to your program. Your program folks are the ones who make the decision and make the recommendation. So talk to your program.
And I would add that going to the program where they completed their previous degree or previous coursework won't do them any good unless that is also a commission approved educator preparation program.
Right.
Which probably isn't. So, if they completed a degree and they need a coursework evaluation and they go to their institution where they completed the degree, and the teacher preparation, the education department gives them an evaluation of subject matter, they can take that to another program. They can take that to you as their teacher preparation program and try to, provide it and use it for subject matter. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that. So just be aware of that. So if you want to be the one that does that evaluation, you need to communicate that to your candidates and let them know that they should be coming to you to do that evaluation.
It would make a lot of sense too for, to ask candidates to identify the courses that they think meet the different domains of the SMRs, so that you're not having to do all the work yourself. Look at what they give you first, and if you disagree with them, then you can dig further in their transcript, but have them do some of the work for you.
Absolutely. There's a good question here about, will there be a training or additional information provided to teacher prep programs on how to conduct the evaluations? So I think we have talked a little bit about maybe bringing institutions together to talk about best practices or efficiencies and how they maybe have, because as you look at candidates' coursework, you may be able to say, oh, we have deemed this course to be equivalent to or to be acceptable for X, Y, or Z. And so, having a database or having some sort of system where you can look things up either system-wide or at least at an institution level, for the future. But if we have talked about bringing institutions together, but in terms of a training, institutions of higher education do coursework evaluations all the time. So it is something that is in your bailiwick even more than it is in the commissions. But we have talked about possibly bringing folks together to talk about best practices.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Cheryl just said, again, we can share with you what we consider to be the best practices, and until we have regulations written, though, we're not going to, we're not the ones telling you how to do this. You have the authority to determine how you want to complete this process and how you want to set your best practices. We will be pursuing regulations that will align some of that, so that we'll make additional requirements related to the grade for coursework evaluation, and degree applicability. But, other than that, it's still going to be up to you all as the programs to determine how you want to approach this.
So someone's asking if they can require a B or better as with basic skills.
Oh, basic skills is different.
Like the requirement in basic skills.
Oh.
So there is no standard set in Ed Code. So programs can set whatever standard they want right now.
Right now.
What we're trying to get everyone to understand is that we will be proposing a standard of C or higher.
And I think to make that clear, once that standard is set, then you wouldn't have the authority to set that higher. That's my understanding. The standard would be set in regulations. So.
All right, so I'm going down a lot of questions about, can only the subject matter programs do that, which I think we've answered, that it's now all commission approved teacher preparation programs. And the PowerPoint will be available, which we've mentioned. Let's see, anybody seeing anything we haven't addressed?
There's a question about whether or not programs can still require the CSAT. Our understanding is that these new options are rights that candidates have, and that if your program is considering still requiring a CSAT, you should contact your legal counsel and make sure that they believe that that is still allowed. We cannot give you legal advice on that.
Great. I am just scrolling through to see if I see anything that we haven't addressed.
I did see one where someone was asking, what if we, because there is no grade set right now, what if we allow someone and pass them along and say they had a D because, you know, Ds still work to some extent, but then later that law changes and regulations and establishes a C minus, what happens to them? Well, at the time that you did the evaluation, you were following the law, and no new law can be applied retroactively. They're not going to go back to that person and be like, well, you did it correctly then, but now we've changed this, so now you're suddenly not meeting the requirement. I mean, we still, like, you know, we've said it over and over, we recommend you kind of get yourselves in line with a C minus or better, since that's where we're heading. But if you get someone through with a D and you've made a decision and they're already all set in the system, that's not going to change later if we do get that into regulations.
And I do want to clarify that the C minus or better is not set in stone. That is what we're moving forward with to propose to the commission, because it aligns with what all other coursework requirements, with the exception of VSR, have been set at historically at the commission, and historically in statute and in regulations. The commission has the authority and will provide direction to staff as to how they want those regulations to be finalized. So this is just the proposed language. This is not final language. So it will move forward to the commission for determination on where we land with it.
This is a good question about recommending a candidate for 2 single subject authorizations. And this example is 1 through CSAT and 1 through degree major, but I can imagine it could be through any of the possible options for candidates. So how does one do that, Angel?
Yeah, I should have actually touched on that earlier. So especially with even with the old
Gold star for whoever asked that one.
Right. And we are going to put something out in writing about this specifically. So keep an eye out for that. But if someone has 2 different authorizations, we are asking that be a paper recommendation at this time, because the system is not going to let them select 2 different options from those drop downs. And like I mentioned before about it, sort of curtailing the available authorization selection to align with the selection at the top portion of that process. There's no way to fiddle with that to let you do 2 authorizations. So that would become a paper recommendation for that individual.
So just to be clear, I'll reiterate it one more time. If you have a candidate who has more than 1 single subject authorization that they're completing with their preliminary credential recommendation, you will have to submit a paper application for that. So it would be the Form 41-4, the 41 REC, and then you just indicate which 2 or more subjects you want to have added on there. And that doesn't apply to bilingual or English learner authorization. So this would just be your statutory single subject areas.
This one's very interesting. We are getting slammed with students who did not attend our institution but are shopping for SMC evaluations. Very interesting. Now, the institution is not required to grant every person that comes through their door that wants an evaluation. They need to do it for the enrolled candidates or their candidates. But, you know, if just somebody out of the blue comes and asks as they're shopping, you're not required to do that for them. If you're considering them for admittance, makes sense. If you're considering them for enrollment, definitely. Anyone want to add anything to that? And remember, we have no jurisdiction over whether or not you charge for those services. Okay.
I was going to say there's a good one that just, because I think you're higher up in the chat, Cheryl, so I'm kind of trying to keep an eye on the ones that are coming in right now.
Right.
David, can you go into a little bit more detail on exactly what will be in the proposed regulations? And now remember, it will be published as an agenda item for the December commission meeting. But if you could reiterate one more time what we're going to be including in that regs packet.
Well, there'll be 2 major parts to it. One will be identifying if there are other majors that are acceptable. So the most obvious are liberal arts and elementary education. With the single subject majors, those we're going to need to look at more closely. So that's that's one part of it. The other part will be about coursework evaluation and setting standards so that the evaluation of coursework will be more consistent across the state. We've talked about, minimum acceptable grade point. That will be part of it. And some of the other traditional things that we look at for coursework is that it be non-remedial, that it be transferable. Anything else I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that's it.
The types of things that we would want to include in the regulatory package.
Right.
We've had some questions. I'm sorry, and I don't know if we've addressed it. I apologize. I had to step away for a second. Folks were there's a question again here in the more recent chat. Can students submit transcripts to the commission if they're not in a program yet? Commission staff is not doing pre-program admittance subject matter competence evaluation. And in fact, I mean, this is historic. Folks have before asked us if we can look at their coursework before they apply for a credential. We can't do that. So we won't be doing that. I mean, the good news there is if they're in your program, we're not going to usurp your authority by reviewing a transcript that you've already looked at and said doesn't work. We are not going to get in between you and your candidates. When candidates come to us with questions, we almost always say you need to go back to your program and work with them. If we have conversations with anyone, it's usually with you. Yeah, we're not going to get in the middle between you and your candidates, hopefully, not intentionally.
This question here says, will it be up to the program to develop a process for a contested review? I think that's a really interesting question. So a candidate maybe disagrees with whatever your assessment was for a coursework evaluation. I think it would be very smart for you to have a very clear, explicit language somewhere in your guidance documents that says that this is what you do. This is how someone can contest it, just like any other appeals process of some sort. But yeah, if you have that very clearly outlined before, your candidates start contesting anything and, trying to question your evaluation, I think that's very smart.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Question about can pass be acceptable for coursework? Again, right now there is no standard. So yes, you may, and we know that a lot of institutions and candidates, institutions allowed candidates to take courses for pass or fail, and many candidates chose that during COVID. So yes, that is acceptable.
And to kind of give you an understanding of why the grade of C or better was selected, that kind of is another reason why, along with just historical precedents at the commission, that many institutions have a grade of C or better associated with a pass. So if they give pass or credit for a course, it would have had to be equivalent to a C or better. So that's kind of some of the background on why we selected that as the proposal. Here's a question related to the Angel's point about paper applications. What about a dual credential education specialist and single or multiple subject? Do we have to do a paper application for those credentials? You do not. They're two separate recommendations for those folks. The only time you would have to do a paper application is if you have a single subject credential candidate who has 2 or more content area authorizations.
Right. All right. Let's see. Scrolling. If anybody sees anything that's, and I apologize for taking a moment. There's a lot of questions here.
If you had a question higher in the chat and it hasn't been answered, you can feel free to put it back in just so it pops lower for us and hopefully we don't miss it.
Okay, let's see. Thank you, Erin, for this clarification. I'm not sure what that was. Reverting back to some earlier questions then, is it advised that the credential program institution perform these evaluations or the undergraduate degree granting institution? I think we've answered that, which is that the teacher preparation program is the responsible party. But how you do that is sort of, your decision. Go ahead, Erin.
No, I just saw a question come in, and it's a great question. Somebody wanted to know, are the preconditions going to change before March 2022? Because of course, preconditions responses are due from institutions that are in years 1 and 4. And the reality is we need to wait for probably some regs clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not likely. It's not likely. Things just don't move that quickly. I don't know, Cheryl, are you feeling more confident?
We were shooting for the February meeting if possible, but it'll be somewhere in the spring, but we will let you know, especially if you have preconditions due. We really need to iron out a few policy issues that there's implications for this to, for instance, but there are some other things in the preconditions that are around that, such as, and that have been impacted also by COVID, such as, you require prior to daily whole class instruction. So there's that discussion around when subject matter is required. So there's a few things that we need to think about with the field to really get the final language on what the new preconditions will look at. But we will make sure to reach out and let you all know if you have preconditions due in the spring, where we're at with the process right after the first of the year, right around the first of the year. But Erin's not wrong. It's probably going to be later in the spring.
I'm always a little more pessimistic than Cheryl. I don't know that it's an asset, but
we've heard a couple times, both in the chat and in correspondence and questions, what's the value of a subject matter program now? Why would an institution want to continue those? I think there are many good reasons, and the top of them are, if these programs are specifically designed for teacher preparation, and we are hearing that the candidates coming out of these programs are so well prepared. The other thing is, think about it from the student's point of view. If you can finish your credential program in a 4-year integrated undergrad program, you're paying a whole lot less in tuition than completing a regular major and then a 5th-year credential program. So I think that there are many, many values to the subject matter programs, and that program institutions should consider continuing them.
They're especially great. Sorry, David. I was just going to say they're especially great for early deciders, for your candidates who are coming in to your institution. They know they want to be a teacher, and they know they want to teach, and they know they don't want to take the test. Like, that's just not a good option for them. That's going to be the subject matter programs are a good option. I'm sorry, David, please.
And one thing we know we need to take a look at is if candidates can be evaluated only at the domain level, is it fair to continue to reviewing subject matter programs at the element level? So that is something we know is an issue. We're going to be thinking about discussing it with the field and possibly making some changes. But this is just too new a change. We're trying to address, the most immediate questions.
One of the questions here that I think is interesting is, can an out-of-state subject matter exam be accepted in the mix and match, or must the exam be CSET?
No, an out-of-state subject matter exam cannot be accepted, because that new provision for mixing and matching allows someone to mix and match any of the existing subject matter provisions, and an out-of-state exam is not an existing subject matter provision. Unlike basic skills, where an out-of-state exam may be an existing subject matter provision for an out-of-state prepared candidate.
The other thing is, out-of-state exams are not designed to assess our SMRs.
Right.
I've seen a question floating through here on if a candidate is seeking an additional credential authorization, who would they go to for an evaluation? So I just want to make it really clear that the statute does not give the commission authority for that coursework evaluation. So I'm going to read directly from the statute. Successful completion of coursework at one or more regionally accredited institutions of higher education that addresses each of the domains of the subject matter requirements adopted by the commission in the content area of the credential pursuant to section 44282 as verified by a commission-approved program of professional preparation. So those candidates who want to use that 80499 process can go to a commission-approved program of professional preparation. That's probably why those of you who are getting inundated with candidates asking for this evaluation, that's probably why this is happening. And you do not have to entertain those requests. You may do so if you so choose, but you do not have to. And those candidates, either will have to find an institution that is willing to do that. We'll have to go to their institution where they completed that coursework, or they'll have to use another subject matter pathway because the statute specifies that it has to be approved by a program of professional preparation.
There are so many questions here, and I think we've gotten a good chunk of them answered, but I know we haven't gotten to all of them, and I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so let's take a few more. Just let's say 2 more. There's some questions about the credit, no credit course be acceptable and pass fail, those kinds of things. Are those acceptable?
I think we've answered that.
Yeah. Is that the same policy as basic skills?
At the moment, with no degree minimum requirement, credit, no credit, pass fail, those are options.
Mm-hmm.
So Monica had a question and somebody seconded her question. Do the IHEs have to offer the coursework evaluation?
Our read of the law says that the candidates have these options available to them. And if you have questions about that, we, again, can't give legal advice. So you might want to talk to your own legal counsel on that. But our read of the law says that these are available options for all candidates.
I think you'd want to be very careful to deny a candidate who wants to enroll in your institution the evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
So just we want you all to be ensuring your own protection and just make sure you run that through the powers that be at your institution.
So with just 1 minute left, I think we want to let you know that we're committed to working with the field on this over the next, this is going to take a while to get rolled out, just the way everybody, works for everybody, and we've addressed every issue. So we'll be working with the field. David and Aaron will be working on the reg package that will go to the commission in December. And so, David, you want to say anything there in terms of the timeline for that? Commission meeting is December 7th and 8th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there will be a public comment period. That wasn't included in the timeline, but just so everyone knows, there is a public comment period. So you will have an opportunity to make public comment on the regulations that are proposed. And you also have an opportunity to comment at the commission meeting when that item is brought forward.
Yeah, and that's an important part of the process is that, whatever we as staff develop and submit to the commission, that's not the final version. The final version is what the commission approves. So I will be pulling together some groups over the next couple weeks and talking to different organizations to get their feedback. We need to have our draft done by about the middle of November in order to meet the posting requirements for the commission meeting. So if you do not feel like your thoughts, your feelings have been heard or are reflected in the draft of regulations that we submit, please feel free to submit your comments written to the commission. You can do that before the meeting, or if you want to provide oral comments, you can do that as well. And then, as Aaron said, there's also a separate process for providing feedback, comments, on a rulemaking process.
Great. I think this wraps it up for now. We are here and available, email we're going to post this right after this meeting. We'll post the PowerPoint, the links should be live, and the list of resources should be live, as well as the email addresses. So,
and Cheryl, can you tell everyone where it'll be posted on the website?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. So it'll be definitely on the demonstration of subject matter page. And what we'll do is we'll make sure to include it in the PSDE news on Friday also. So if you miss it, it'll be there. And we will put it probably on the What's New page. I think that would be probably the best place as well. Thank you, Erin. Don't want people searching around.
Yeah.
Looks like Michelle just posted it in a link in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Nice. Good.
Thanks, Michelle.
That. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.